Very funny.
We now give you our brand new little sweetheart of swing.
Welcome to Stay Tuned, the show for animation lovers. Recorded live on Twitch, broadcast on YouTube, and proudly streaming on Patreon. Coming to you from Austin, Texas, I'm your host, Phil Machi. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. Tonight, you better watch your back because the sticky-fingered filcher herself, Carmen Sandiego, is at it again. And this time, Gumshoes, she's been spotted on Netflix. All that, and you'll have a chance to share your thoughts, questions, and opinions with me for a live Q&A after the show. Video game adaptations don't exactly have the most successful track record, but occasionally something manages to break through across multiple mediums. Even more rare is when an educational property breaks ground in entertainment. And that is precisely what the Miss in Misdemeanor, known as Carmen Sandiego, has managed to do. Carmen's most recent exploits find her in a new series on Netflix, and I'm about to fill you in on how it stacks up to her previous outings in just a few moments. But first, this. I'm really eager to talk about tonight's first impressions, and here's why. My childhood is rooted in the late 80s and early 90s. Many of the stories, games, and intellectual properties I grew up with are getting rebooted and relaunched. I guess it's just that time where the powers that be figure we're all old enough now to buy stuff we connected with, for ourselves and the children that my generation is now raising. Well, I don't have any kids of my own, and I've somehow managed to continue the Saturday morning tradition of eating a big bowl of crunchy cereal while watching cartoons. So when a new animated series based on the well-known Carmen Sandiego character was announced, I got really excited, let alone the fact that there's a live-action movie in the works. The international, and yes, even interstellar, thief known as Carmen Sandiego strikes once more. This time, she's got a 9-episode premiere season on Netflix. It's new, it's inventive, it's not really the same thing, but that's kind of okay. I am totally cool when someone wants to mess with the formula a bit in order to shake things up and create something new. Heck, I'm a Batman fan, for crying out loud, and that guy's been reinvented more times than I care to count. But I'm not totally convinced by this new animated series. And in order to properly tell you why, I've got to remind you of who Carmen Sandiego really is. Or in this case, who she was. A master thief and leader of criminal organization Vile. The original Broderbund video game series began in 1985 with Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego? The gist of many entries into this series was this. A goofy crook from Vile has stolen something outlandish, like the Bering Strait or the Pyramids of Giza, and it's up to you to track them down. This wild goose chase will take you across the world through a number of exotic locations until you use a warrant to catch the criminal scum and toss them into jail. As the game progresses, you eventually start tracking down Carmen herself. The game ends once all the criminals, including Carmen, are captured and all the stolen items returned. Hopefully, you learn something in the process about art, culture, and world geography, or in other versions of the game, things like math and history. These games were fun and informative, like proper edutainment should be. Their success spawned 2 hit game shows for PBS and an animated series, all of which garnered a number of daytime Emmys and even a Peabody Award. Books, albums, TV shows, Carmen was having herself a moment in time, let me tell you. And then everything all but dried up. Carmen passed through several corporate hands until a more recent acquisition gave way to her very welcome rebirth, starting with a new animated series that premiered just under a month ago. Something that's always intrigued me about the character of Carmen herself is her mystery. In the games, she was the final obstacle, the boss, and unlike her henchmen, she didn't have any goofy qualities. So, when you take that into consideration, the choices behind the new animated series on Netflix can be a bit disorienting. This reimagined Carmen Sandiego gives us our first look at her origin story. So, right off the bat, we're diving into new territory, which is fantastic. The first 2 episodes of the Netflix series is a 2-parter meant to provide us with context as to why Carmen does what she does. And what she does in this cartoon is steal from Vile. That's right, Carmen has been turned into a modern-day Robin Hood. She was raised from within the criminal organization known as Vile, only to turncoat with a personal vendetta. Her new mission, to stop Vile from succeeding in their thievery and ultimately end their organization. Unfortunately for her, the authorities aren't exactly on the same page. Oftentimes, it is Carmen seen fleeing from the scene of the crime, and therefore she wrongfully winds up taking the blame. This new twist on an old classic is certainly inventive, I'll give it that. And apparently, it's already becoming quite popular. So, why do I feel less than enthusiastic than the majority of the viewing audience? Honestly, I struggled to pinpoint my reasoning while watching all 9 episodes. To better answer that question, let's take a closer look at the new show. The visuals. Here's where the new show shines brightest. Its cut-out style and sharp illustration-like feel are similar to that of the series Samurai Jack and Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. My favorite part of watching this show has been literally the act of watching it. It's just enjoyable to look at. That's thanks in part to design and animation studio Chromosphere. There are some nods back to the previous series that got us here, Where on Earth is Carmen Sandiego? Among them, a Muzak elevator version of the theme from that series. Next up is the cast. Carmen has a few helpers to get her from point A to B. First off, there's a kid who is something of a hacker. He goes by the nickname Player, which is reminiscent of the Where on Earth series, but here's where the new show takes a left turn. On the old show, Player would interact with Carmen at the beginning and end of each episode, taunting one another. "I'm gonna catch you soon, Carmen," and "See you next crime, Player." You get the idea. As an audience, we understood that the kid was playing a video game and that this was an added level of interaction between machine and man. It broke the fourth wall, but it was cute. Now there are no more video games. Player is a literal child who is interacting with an actual adult and helping her along with her globe-trotting ways via his computer. I understand the concept here, making kids feel like they have a way into Carmen's world. They can't be Carmen herself, but they could be Player. It's the same idea behind the introduction of Robin to Batman's world. Except, why would an adult who is a master thief accept the assistance of a child computer hacker? I'm sorry, but it's a little weird. Player isn't the only assistant to Our Lady in Red. Zach and Ivy, a brother-sister pair hailing from Boston with a penchant for bickering, are here too. They made their mark back on the Where on Earth show, but have since been updated. Their visual style has been changed to look more average. What I mean by that is, they're not the typical idealized versions of men and women we see on TV. They're not morbidly obese or anything, but they like their cheesesteaks, if you know what I mean. The freckle-faced family duo now gives off a more Tweedledum and Tweedledee vibe. And you know something? It works. And you know something? It works. On the old show, Zack and Ivy were our main characters, and they were aided by the player in tracking down Carmen. Now, Zack and Ivy make occasional appearances as Carmen's friendly assistants. Whether it be driving the getaway vehicle or creating a diversion, they've become semi-helpful comic relief. Of all the story changes, this is the one that I can live with. I've noticed that when a new take on an old favorite occurs, it's hard to make references feel anything but forced. And that's how the educational parts of this new Carmen feel. I applaud their efforts in working some historical and geographical teachable moments into things, but unlike the Where on Earth series, here it's few and far between, not to mention a little dry. In the first game show, education was literally the lifeblood. Facts were well integrated into the writing in the form of clues that the contestants, or Acme detectives, used to track down the vile agents. The majority of that show was education mixed with humor. You couldn't help but learn something because it was everywhere. That same recipe for knowledge was carried into the Where on Earth animated series, and it worked there too. The problem with the Netflix series is that it's mostly a narrative. With a few facts sprinkled here and there, the educational elements now feel obligatory. And now for the henchmen. I love puns, wordplay, and clever humor. Now, of course, there's a time and a place for that style of comedy. The Netflix series tries to weave some comedic elements throughout. There are some amusing moments, but this series generally takes itself much more seriously. You see, back in the game show days, Carmen's henchmen were goofy, mustache-twirling baddies with punny names. Patty Larceny, Vic the Slick, Double Trouble, to name a few. None of those characters are present here, which I found to be a missed opportunity. Now that Carmen is the good guy, she no longer has henchmen, but agents of Vile do still exist in this world. Back when she was being raised by Vile to be a thief, her fellow classmates served as early adversaries. Well, Carmen's a do-gooder now, so those former friends have become full-on foes. I have to admit, I can see how hard the series creators are trying to mix things up. And I've got to give them credit because these foes are all very different. Most are legitimate threats, while others range from a potential love interest to a literal mime. That's right, a mime. Perhaps the biggest change, though, is with Carmen herself. I can't help but wonder if the alterations to her character, turning her altruistic, was a result of our overly sensitive media landscape. Are we worried that children will want to emulate a thief and therefore couldn't possibly create a spy show for kids where the titular character has ill intentions? It wouldn't be the first time something like that happened. I'm really torn here because I love the idea of taking something familiar and turning it on its ear, but not for the sake of political correctness. I don't know if it's just off to a slow start or if we can expect more of the same, but the writing has felt very bland or formulaic. Maybe safe is a better word, because it feels like they're pulling punches in favor of creating something non-offensive. All that being said, I'm still looking forward to the remaining 11 episodes yet to air. That's mainly due to episodes 7 through 9. A major plot twist regarding Carmen's past was revealed, and the action elements became much more exciting. Through all 9 episodes, we are introduced to the world of Carmen Sandiego and get to know a bit about her childhood. The use of flashbacks and the ever-present desire to know what happened to her as a baby, leading her to be raised by Vile, propels the story forwards. It's just so different now. There is such a significant focus on self-discovery and understanding her upbringing. Even as I say that out loud, I know those should be good things, but they just wound up making me wish for a better mystery story. And maybe that's the best part of this new series. Its ability to be different. Personal feelings about the writing aside, there is clearly a lot of thought being put into the show. In the Where on Earth series, Carmen was a former Acme agent turned rogue thief in search of a challenge. Bringing to mind Batman's The Riddler, Carmen would leave clues at the scene of her crimes for Zack, Ivy, and the player to find. She was still a criminal, sure, but she managed to keep her general morality surrounding violence. She was more of a large-scale cat burglar. Her existence in the early video games and game shows represented her as a flat villain. After her transformation into a defected member of the Acme agency, I guess reverse thief is the next plausible step? The new series' music can be best described as functional and little more than musical wallpaper. The score leaves much to be desired in the sense of repeated listening outside of the show itself. Now, the one exception here is with the opening theme by Jared Lee Gosselin. Beautifully animated and with a spy movie-inspired flair, I recommend not skipping that part before each episode. In the 90s, the a cappella stylings of musical group Rockapella provided the theme for that first game show. It has gone on to live in infamy, and the group themselves are still putting out amazing music to this day. The Where on Earth animated theme is also catchy and boasted a more triumphant and symphonic take. That's because it provided original lyrics to Sing Songs of the Great Pasha from the Mozart opera The Abduction from Seraglio. A noteworthy characteristic that the intellectual property has been praised for as a whole is its cultural diversity. The Acme chief from the 90s game shows was played by African-American actress Lynn Thigpen. This was carried over into the new Netflix series, now played by Dawn Lewis. Carmen herself has always been a Hispanic character. Once played by Rita Moreno for the Where on Earth series, she is now represented by Jane the Virgin star Gina Rodriguez. Rodriguez does the character justice and is slated to play her in the upcoming Netflix live-action film as well. Carmen Sandiego is a unique retelling that both expands the original concept while still remaining relatively faithful to its roots. The clever wordplay is all but gone, and Carmen's motivations drastically altered. Turning her from a one-dimensional thief into a person with a past and aspirations for a future was absolutely the right move to make. Unfortunately, even with all of those things in its corner, I still found myself surprisingly bored. The cat and mouse pursuit between the bumbling detective Chase Deveneaux and Carmen herself is more annoying than interesting. Mystery is all but missing, and the thrill of the hunt with it. The writing offers a fresh take, but the humor is mediocre at best. One thing is certain, the new focus is centered around who is Carmen Sandiego. Is my reaction to this series tainted by nostalgia? Possibly, but I went into it eagerly and really tried to embrace the new direction. In the end, it all feels like an interesting concept that is somehow afraid to push the envelope. That could be due to the intended target audience, but I'll tell you this much. The opening theme sequence teases us with a tale of intrigue and excitement, both of which I found to be sorely lacking during the show. Edutainment is a tough category to master, which ultimately is fine. I mean, no one said a show about Carmen Sandiego had to be educational. In this case, I'd say the pendulum has swung too far in the opposite direction. If the series continues, they should just remove the fun facts part altogether in order to maintain the momentum they've already established. We've been given 3 versions of Carmen Sandiego over the years, and now we've managed to hit both ends of the spectrum. From one-note baddie in the games to reformed criminal who at first didn't know any better. Personally, I'm happiest with the Where on Earth series. It was the perfect compromise and gave us a villain we could still really love. My hope in the Netflix series was somewhat restored during the final 3 episodes of Season 1, and I am interested in seeing where they take it, so they've managed to pique my curiosity at least. It is absolutely possible to create something that appeals to both children and adults. I believe the talented staff behind this show can do it too, and they've exhibited a lot of potential. Netflix has ordered 20 episodes in total for the series, so with 11 more to go, we'll just have to wait and see. I'm giving Carmen Sandiego 7.5 out of 10 stolen artifacts. That was Carmen Sandiego 2020 by Rockapella. The group's early claim to fame came in the form of the theme song for Carmen's first 1990s game show. And though the roster has changed, the musical magic of these five guys has continued to entertain all these years later. This latest incarnation of a Carmen theme was originally intended to be used for her Netflix series, but sadly, that never came to pass. Thankfully, the track can be found on their new album, Jams Volume 2, available from rockapella.com. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Thanks so much to all of you listening in live on Twitch. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you would like to support Stay Tuned and listen anytime, join me over on Patreon at patreon.com/Phil Machi to become a subscriber today. Among the cool rewards available there, you can also stream this show anytime you like, which means never missing an episode. For more fun, check out my original comic books at retailsunshine.com, and you can interact with me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook under the handles of both Retail Sunshine and Phil Machi. Also, you can keep up to date with the latest animation news by visiting this show at facebook.com/Stay Tuned Show. I've been Phil Machi, you've been a wonderful audience, and until next time, keep those eyeballs peeled, those ears open, and be sure to stay tuned. Alrighty. Oh, I missed a bunch of comments apparently. Welcome to the show. Thank you. Welcome to the after party, everybody. I'm so excited to have you here. I think this is my first review night on Twitch, actually, because last week was my first night doing an interview show. So this is the first review night. I'm so glad you're here. If you're wondering what I'm talking about, the show has been on YouTube live streaming since roughly August or September of last year, right? And now I moved the show to Twitch, and I'm live streaming on Twitch, and then tomorrow I'll edit the show down and put it on YouTube. But you're here right now, which means you get to talk with me in the chat, and we're going to talk all about Carmen Sandiego, or really any other cartoon series that you're really into right now.